Ready?
I'm ready. All right. Welcome to Trust the Journey. I'm Melanie Curtis.
And I'm Jason Maletsky.
Our mission is to live, laugh, love, and learn together with you.
We're here to create conscious connections, to grow, and contribute through our practice of openness, honesty, vulnerability, humility, and trust. Trusting the entire journey.
Yeah, on the internet, everyone, we are at trustthejourney.today. That's our website, our Instagram, everything. If you would like to join the Trust the Journey family, which is where we continue the conversation beyond the podcast and connect and support each other, donate through Patreon, which is a button on our website as well toward the bottom, and we'll add you to the private Facebook group. Right on, family. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us. Here we go. All right, guys, in this episode, we're doing a second episode on teams. We did one last week and we were like, God, there's so much more to talk about. There's so much more to cover on teams. So today we're going to do deep dive number 2 on that topic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I just came from a 3-day team environment working with my Flight 1 family. It's our military cadre and our corporate entity all working together out in Arizona doing our biannual military forum, which is a big get together of everybody where we just review everything we do as a company and all the experiences that everybody has working with all of our clients, and we kind of assess everything and we bring forward a bunch of ideas and we bring about the information. It's a huge team working session, right? So it's interesting. Like, I wasn't thinking about coming from that straight to this podcast, but as it goes, team after team after team after team. And I think it really, the big reason why for me, I was like, man, we really need to do a second episode about this, is because we have so much time. Now you're the same. I know, Melanie, just team after team after team in so many different environments and different settings. And I felt like it would be so worth it to just expand upon the learnings and the values that we've received through these experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. Like last week, we started talking about families, and then we expanded a bit into our skydiving experience. And interestingly, that the first idea that we're talking about today is like a bigger team, certainly sport team, but also business team. Just it covers such a scope, and I almost don't even know where to start, to be truthful. I'm not joking, rocked up to this episode. I'm like, okay, I'm going to let Jay start it off and then I'm going to riff on where we go, because it's such a wide scope of experience and different things that we could share, it almost turns my brain off, because I'm like, God, there's just so much. What do you even start with? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I appreciate that trust too, because I really think that says a lot about the value of team in itself, is that very oftentimes when you put yourself in a situation where you do have a team that you can count on, that is going to have your back, that can pick up the ball where you may not know who to pass it to or be ready to make a shot, you can always make a pass to somebody else. So I'm going to start off with a couple things. I want to do a little review of some of the things we talked about last episode, because I feel like it's key to just kind of hit on those points. But I do want to start with a post, which was, I think it was a little GIF that one of our Trust the Journey family members posted this morning. Annette posted up this really simple little meme, and it's a team thing, right? Where it's this member of the team, a basketball team, has just taken a shot. I guess he missed it or something, and he's walking, his chin's down, and his teammate is just running by and just smacks him on the hand, puts his hand under his chin, picks his chin back up, and keeps on walking. Yes. And the comment was, the only kind of members I let on my team, kind of thing, and it just says so much.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Yeah, I mean that we talked about that last week too, like the idea that choosing teammates and ideally having that culture of support and actual teamwork, because it can happen that you don't necessarily have that culture of teamwork inside of a team, but what we can do is we can intentionally create that and intentionally be that as leadership inside of our small teams, like really just being committed to supporting one another through the ups and downs and all of those things, celebrating the victories and helping each other and lifting each other up when we're having challenge.
Definitely. So, some of what we talked about on the last episode, I think one of the key points that came up was we did a lot about the debrief process, and we did, which is such a hugely valuable thing. We talked a little bit about the kind of pass the rock idea about improving communication. And we also talked about the idea of working with others who are maybe more advanced skills than us in order to put ourselves next to people to have the ability to learn, as well as being the other way around. If you're more experienced, bringing people up, in that environment of nurture, as well as fun. We would definitely hit on the idea of fun, and we talked about the challenges a little bit too. One of the things I wanted to head this conversation towards today is one of the, I would say, some of the biggest takeaways that I've had in my 25 years of, professional sports teams. And it has to do with alignment and taken the time to clearly think through, communicate, establish, clarify, reestablish, reiterate, and communicate the goal, the mission, the vision of whatever the project is that you're working on. And so if I were to use Trust the Journey as an example, I feel like we did a great job and continue to do a great job for our team of constantly keeping that set of our goals, our mission, our vision, and our values in the highest regard as to why we're here and what we're doing. And now, why I wanted to put this up on as one of the first points to talk about is through my own experience, I feel like it's been both our greatest asset and simultaneously a worst failing, and completely been the cause of, crumble of why a team has fallen apart and failed to, stand the test of time or continue to have value for its members, where other teams have just been absolute, beautiful examples of what can be accomplished if those things have been put at the top of the priority list. And I'll just round this statement out with saying this has all come through a process of learning. This has been something that definitely didn't start with like first team and be like, all right, guys, what's most important is that we line our goals.
Right. Because we know so much at the beginning of doing teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, yeah, I wanted to put this idea forward to have a little conversation about maybe tell some stories and talk a little bit about our experiences with having highly clarified vision and mission for a group, or maybe slightly less clarified, or actually coming to realization that our goals are not aligned, and how powerful those processes are towards the iterative process moving forward.
Yeah. It's makes me think of startup culture in a business sense, because and the common term of and this is just one part of quote unquote startup culture that I would speak to, is this idea that we start with an idea and we have a vision and a mission and a goal for a product or whatever, and or service. And as you go through the process of learning with your team, that idea and its manifestation into reality might change. So this is just pretty common in the entrepreneurial space, where some companies, when they recognize that their idea and or its connection or its highest value or highest form, as it were, is another direction, they do what's called pivot. So that calls us to really assessing. That speaks directly to the debrief process. But this idea of pivoting, if the direction really does show itself as changing in a beneficial way for everyone in the world based on whatever it is you're creating or building or making, it takes courage to do that, to pivot. It takes intention to reflect on the results that you are getting. I've had many a conversation with clients, with life coaching clients who are business people and entrepreneurial sorts, and helping them get past the idea that the original vision and the original idea of whatever a person is creating is the only way for an idea to take shape. As in, it's not failure if they decide to change. So I don't know how much you heard of that, Jay, because I know my internet went unstable. Yeah, I'm going to say it again because I think it's actually useful. I'll say it in a concise way, but basically helping those entrepreneurial clients of mine, those business clients of mine, get past the idea that the original idea, if it doesn't end up that they get to that original formation of the idea, that is not failure. That is simply part of the process of being in business, of being in a creative pursuit, which is, I very much consider business and entrepreneurship to be a highly creative pursuit and project. So that's one reason I love entrepreneurship and business, is that it feels very creative to me.
Absolutely echo that without a doubt. I was actually one of the key points that I had brought up for myself to want to talk about is that concept of pivot. Through my own experience, and I'll go to the one that's most well known from my own history with PD Factory Team. The original PD Factory Team was a 4-way formation skydiving team. Right? It wasn't even a canopy piloting team. It was a free fall team. And Ian and Shannon, my teammates and business partners in Flight 1, they are some of the original members of that formation skydiving team. And that team made a pivot after, I think, 2 years of being the PD Factory Team for formation skydiving. The company decided, actually, let's reorient this towards canopy piloting. And that's when they brought on myself and Heath Richardson. And the iterative process continued to roll along and took place for a couple of years there. And we switched from Heath left the team and Jonathan joined the team. And in the meantime, Cisco Neary was on the team for a bit and then left the team. And then JC came in and replaced him. So there's membership of the team coming and going, and the direction and the goals of the team kind of refocusing, like drawing in to say, oh, what are we actually aiming to do, and how's the best way to do it, and who are the best people to do it with. So it's a constant, refocusing iterative process, and it had a solid pivot in it. And then interesting, I was really thinking about this in the last few days, is that team that we kind of ended up with in, like, say, 2005 with JC Colclaser, Shannon Pilcher, Ian Bobo, and myself, we are all still on an active team together 15 years later. But we've pivoted multiple times. The goal of the team, the objective of the team has completely changed from being a high-performance canopy piloting team to becoming an entrepreneurial company to start a canopy skills training company in what was originally aimed at the civilian market, right? The sport marketplace. And that again pivoted and changed to the military marketplace, and then completely developing a whole new team and expansion and growth in that area. So just my own review of that process of going, how do we get from A to B with all these changes and turns in the road? But what I want to bring that all back to is how the commonality of the vision, the mission, and the values has kept the group together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really feel like without those pieces, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
It really is the defining piece, because especially when you have such dramatic change, when you start off doing one thing and you end up doing something else, and you're like, hey, this isn't what I signed up for. I joined this team to do this goal. We had picked something for ourselves.
Yep.
And that's a tough call to be able to say, do I want to still do this, or is this value aligned with me? And we've moved through so many versions of what we do. And of course, I'm only using this example as it's one of the most recent, and it's easily relevant. But there's so many versions of this in our lives, but whether we are value aligned and whether we have taken the time to really dig into what it is that we want to get back from these partnerships, from these team investments, from these, collective investments of energy.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, it's cool because the teammates, that's a great example, I feel like, of how values and those sort of underlying commitments and intentions with the team, even when it's pivoting, when they continue to be aligned and communicated, the teammates can continue forward, creating newly, still together. When they diverge, then teammates can go their separate ways for whatever reasons, right? A good example for me, and this is just a very small example, but Carolyn Chow, one of my very best friends, you can actually see her in the video. She's in a giant picture on my wall. If you are not watching the YouTube video, I invite you, friends, to go check it out. See Carolyn. Anyway, so Carolyn and I were on lots of skydiving teams together. It's one of the ways we built our friendship and had so much fun and just really learned together, grew together. So many of the Trust the Journey values and stuff like that. Anyway, we've also made so many funny spoof movies. I laugh because, oh my God, you guys, I will never not die and cry the sweet, sweet tears of hilarity because of the creative work Carolyn and I have done as a small team creating funny movies. Now, where I'm going with this is obviously we did not continue on skydiving teams. We have since stopped that part of our work together. We still will make funny movies together if we have an idea. That will continue into, I think, our later years in life. But what I want to share relative to Carolyn is that when I was a younger entrepreneur and sort of building myself up as a person in personal development and a content creator, as it were, I'm trying to use all the fucking terms of this day and age, whatever. When I was growing as a life coach and that type of entrepreneur, I recognized pretty early on, and by the way, didn't solve this problem until quite a bit later on, is I was always just the bottleneck. I've always was kind of doing it by myself. It's personal brand. I'm very committed to, and it's felt difficult for me to trust people, to bring them on. I've shared that on the show before. So anyway, Carolyn and I talked about, let's be kind of partners and let's try to figure out a way for us to partner, because she's got some major skills in communication and teamwork and stuff like that. So it was exciting for us. We bought the book, The Right Brained Business Plan, and that's a business planning book for creative minds. And we worked through the whole process. We had sticky notes all over and this and that. We made some videos about kind of the expansion project that we were trying to create together. And ultimately, it just didn't work for her, her desired lifestyle. It was not a problem. She completely supports me and believes in me, but it became clear once we tried to really create that and live into that potential, that the active execution of her being a partner in my business wasn't a fit for her. And that was no problem. So we just said, cool, I'm glad we tried that, and I'll go forward new with a new set of knowledge and go forward and see how I might create teamwork or partnership going forward. So, yeah.
It's I find it to be a true sign of when you really understand each other as team members, to be able to recognize, to say this isn't what I want, like to say no thank you, and to let it go is
Yep.
it's probably the most powerful piece of the entire process of really knowing when to step back from something. And chances are, I will bet you money that there's a point in the future where there is another point where the path crosses again, and there is a where say, yes, this does work for me. It doesn't always go that way, but from my own experience, I've seen that oftentimes, like, we get a dose of something and our goals align for a period, and then they don't. And that's completely normal. It
Yeah.
is natural path to be like, oh yeah, we'll walk next to each other for a while and then we'll go our own way.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll meet up again somewhere. And if we do, or we don't walk next to each other for a while again, awesome. Either way, that I can't say enough of how many times I've seen, especially like I was saying, the sign of a true teammate is when you can depart, go on your own path, come back when there is an opportunity for alignment, and say, yeah, I could jump in here. Like, this is something that does serve mutually the goals and values that we've lined up for ourselves, and I'd love to be part of it again. And I always feel like those are the most rewarding relationships, where they're truly, where we as individuals are truly leaning into our own set of values and our own set of qualities, the things that are important to us in our lives, and saying, yeah, what I'm doing here lines up with my heart set, my soul needs, the things that I really value.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to quickly share about the when to move on thing. I also, just to quickly, because the other side of that is, of course, challenging ourselves in ways that we aren't necessarily used to, or don't have experience at whatever level. So there's a balance. We always talk about the polarity of this particular piece of the team conversation of moving on or letting go of something, is this idea of when do we push and when do we elevate and when do we lean into an uncomfortable experience because it's part of maybe growing. So that's a different part of this subject, but I wanted to highlight it quickly to balance what I'm about to share. So when we put in a lot of time and energy, effort, resources into a team effort, there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy. Have you ever heard of that, Jay?
I've never. No, that's
Yeah.
the first time for me. Yeah.
So the sunk cost fallacy is basically this idea of when we have committed all that time, resources, energy, whatever, then there's this feeling of, well, I better continue. Like, you can't let go because it's a big giant waste. So it's like, I have all this sunk cost. I've sunk all this energy, resources, time, all this cost. So if I stop now, fuck, right? But that sunk cost fallacy can take people way, way further down a road that is not right for them. So it's not to just be like, oh, cool, I have this idea of a sunk cost fallacy, so now I can quit. So I'm the balance of this is, it must be a mindful choice. You know what I mean? Because there's also this book that I read by Seth Godin. It's called The Dip, and it's about strategic quitting. I actually encourage people to read it, because I used to be that type of person and teammate where I was like, if I say I'm going to do something, because my integrity, I hugely care about my integrity and my word. So if we think that when we say something, that we have to forever, for the rest of our lives, do that thing that is really, there's no freedom and no ability to pivot. There's no ability to reassess with that idea. So the dip is like looking at what is strategic quitting. I start something and I learn, and it's maybe clear to me that this is not what I want to do, or it's not the way that they say it in the book is funny. He's like, if you're not going to be the best in the world at this, then stop. I don't necessarily know about that, but it's an interesting. Jay's raising his hand. It's an interesting idea that I think is valid and worthwhile to put into our brain to help us balance our decision making when it comes to teams and continuing or not continuing.
You're hitting the nail right on the head, and I had just made some notes for myself regarding lifetime of a project or a team, or the term. And so the reason why I used two different terminologies, lifetime or term, was because I feel like one of the greatest tools, most powerful tools, there we go. One of the most powerful tools that we've used inside of a PD Factory team and then inside of Flight One has been an annual review process. And now this is a really simple thing for a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, a lot of groups use an annual review. But what I really think about it was, for me, with my experience inside of the factory team, was that it came from the desire to want to look at our past, talk about all the goals that we had put up for ourselves, review how well we did at accomplishing our goals, and really just have like a straight up debrief. Like, okay, we started the year with this list of objectives. We finished the year with this list of performances. How well did we execute on our set of goals? And then stop at that moment and go, okay, now I'm in this. Now we're each individually at this point in ourselves. Here's where we've reached the end of our commitment to this project. And where do we find ourselves, and what do we see for ourselves going forward? And do we have goals for the future, and what are they? And do they align? Do we have agreement upon the goals going forward from this point in time? And where do we want to make commitments as a group towards goals going forward? And so just do the linear process and really keep it real, right? And most importantly, have real accountability to what we said we were going to do the first time, how well we actually executed on that, and whether or not we're happy with how those performances, ended up with what the results were, to better determine what actions we take towards our next set of goals or mission or whatever things we're aligning for ourselves to go forward on. And I feel like this, it's a interesting reflection that's what I just came from this weekend. Was another one of these sessions where we gather everybody together and we sit and we talk about how well have we been doing, are we happy with our performances, and here's where we think we've been failing, and here's where we think we've been highly successful, and here's where we'd like to have more alignment going forward on these objectives. And even for, if we think of ourselves first, and we go, okay, just me, I'm just talking Jay for a second here, right? Like, let me just separate from any of my relationship commitments with the team I have with Mel at Trust the Journey. Let me separate from Flight One or anything, and just be just me for a second and go, okay, Jay, what did you set out to do over the last year? And just take a quick stop and just assess myself and say, what did you set out to do this year? Okay, well, you planned this project that you're going to do. You planned this team thing you're going to do. You planned some house renovations. You plan to get better at doing these things, maybe cooking or exercising, or maybe I plan to do some growth work, and then truly assess how well I checked off my boxes, and be able to sit back and say, all right, am I happy with how well I did? Am I okay to make new goals, or do I have to keep some of the same ones that I have had in the past? And how much space does that leave me for everything else that I need to have in my life? Or where do I need to reassess or evolve in my plans to better truly serve myself because I have to put myself first. And now the reason why I say this very cautiously is I have to put myself first because I want to make sure that what I commit to others truly gets delivered,
Yeah.
right? I
Oh,
want to make
yeah.
sure that if I now take Jay out of my self-assessment and I sit into this team meeting with Mel and I say, hey, Mel, all right, so what's the Trust the Journey project got in store for you for the next year? What's it got in store for me? And we agree upon a set of goals. If I overcommit myself individually
Yep.
before I commit into this team, and now I'm going to, if I, now that's going to set me up for failure in the team environment where I'm not going to be able to meet my objectives, then I was never honest with myself in the first place. And that didn't start in the team environment. It started in the individual environment where I really didn't do a clear self-assessment of my resources, my energy, my availability. And now I'm going to round out this statement, but the perceived alignment or investment into the team is where it seems like there might be a disparity, right? I can't tell you how many times I've been on both sides of this coin where I've said, yeah, I want to be part of this. And then I can't really deliver at the level that I want to. Or I say, yeah, I want to be part of this. And somebody else on the team who says, yeah, I want to be part of this too, has a completely different perspective or position towards what that means. And then we end up at that year later meeting going, well, this, I didn't fulfill what I said I was going to, or you didn't fulfill what you said. So you hear where this is all going.
Yeah. Yeah. The impact of saying yes without thoughtful consideration to our bandwidth and our reasons why we are doing that has huge negative implications for any team environment. AKA, I love that you brought up yourself because I was thinking that earlier as we were talking, is this idea that I'm in a team with myself. I'm working with myself too. So it's like, how does integrity, how does, assessment debrief show up in my life with my own little team here? And how do I hold myself accountable? The integrity of commitment and accountability. It's interesting how for a lot of people that can show up so differently in their team with themselves. And I see a lot of nurturers, and I can only speak to this because this definitely was me, the people pleasers of the world tend to have trouble in team environments at first because and I say this again from my own experience, I've had this experience of really wanting to say yes to people to please them, not having consciousness to that as a younger person, and then basically having the life experience of complete overwhelm, eventual breakdown, stuff like that. A great example of that for me is I did a VFS team when I first moved to Arizona. I did a VFS team a year on the team dysfunction. And it was this incredible opportunity. My teamies, oh my God, I love them so much. I just like Pat, Travis, Jared, they were so much better than me. So it was this amazing, beautiful silver platter opportunity to fly with them. And I'm grateful that I said yes because I survived that experience. But it was excruciatingly difficult for me because I was so exhausted from other overcommitments, just as you said, that it was a true rigorous struggle. It had truly what got me through that was my commitment and my integrity to them and the commitment I made to them and how awesome and supportive they were and the contribution that they hoped that I could make for the team, which was, so I might not have been the best flyer, but I had a fuck ton of experience on belly flying and having structure. And at that point in skydiving, free fly teams, as it were, didn't really have a lot of experience with structure and debrief and process. So I feel good that I was able to bring that to that team. And after the season was over. Oh my God, freaking Waterworks, because they were so supportive of me and I felt like I was holding them back the entire time. And it was just a really rigorous experience, but ended up serving me in a lot of ways to learn those kinds of lessons.
It's awesome. It's you were mentioning the early free fly, and I was also in the same situation where I came from an FS background, but also started free flying in the mid '90s. So had the both and situation, and the flow of the free fly world of like flow, fun, just fly. This is a huge value asset, right? Like that you cannot deny how important that is in any creative space, right? So if you're working to design the next cool iPhone case, or if you're making funny formations in the sky, having a creative process that allows for freedom and change of direction and expression, that's what really is where the magic happens. And at the same time, you need the structure to capture it all and to make sure that the work gets done and that the things actually follow through to completion. Yeah.
And elevate the results, I mean, the structure
Yes.
really does elevate the result. Like even just looking at us in our last annual review and our setting the goal of having better audio,
Yeah.
and then holding ourselves accountable to making that happen.
Yep.
That's a simple example of that, but it has implication, because I bet you $1,000,000 that a bunch of people, or there are people in the world that started listening to our show and were like, "Oh Jesus, I can't handle this audio." You know what
For
I
sure.
mean?
For sure. Me,
I
I'm
do
one of
that
them.
to other podcasts.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? So I like that we acknowledge the impact of our decisions, and it's just usually highlighted in a team environment because we are being held accountable.
You just finished that off with the third time that you've said that word in like the last 3 minutes, and I have it in bold capital letters with highlighter marker, circling and filling, highlighting it, and I really okay. So I just came back from this weekend of teamwork, and my our company, Flight One, we work with military clients. We train military jumpers how to fly parachutes. And we've been asking ourselves the question, going around the room one by one, what's the biggest thing you've learned from working with our clients? And the big word, the number one word that gets repeated by everybody is accountability. And it's
Fuck yeah.
100% across the board. There's two words that end up reflecting each other. So people say accountability, and they say that when you're completely accountable, when you say, I own that, I did that, that was the result, good or bad, I made this decision, this was the outcome, I completely stand here in front of everybody willing to accept judgment for that, that mirror is respect. The respect that comes back from your working group, from your peers, through 100% brutal facts, honesty, accountability, lets everybody be human. And it lets everybody own their mistakes confidently and own their successes confidently. But there's no need to put our successes up and be like, yeah, check out what I did. It's more like, no, check out what I did. Here's where I erred. And now by owning it, by being accountable to it, taking ownership in this, we allow each other the room to be human. Right? And that is, I think, the biggest piece in the whole puzzle, is because we're never going to be mistake free. Nobody moves through any process without making a mistake at some point or another. And usually there's multiple mistakes through the process ongoing, right?
Yep.
It's when we hide them or when we try to pretend like they didn't happen. That's more, they say, the accurate. It's not really hiding. It's like just kind of glossing over it. Like, yeah, maybe I blew a whole bunch of money on something that didn't work out and ended up being a big loss to our budget. And we're just not going to say anything about that.
Right.
By not saying anything, you degrade trust. You burn a hole in the trust of the people that we're working with. So, or if you make a silly error and it puts everybody in jeopardy, puts the project or the goals or whatever it is in jeopardy, causes some kind of unnecessary risk or amplifies a risk that's already there, That's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. But man, that I have so here's it's a three-piece structure, right? Accountability is number one. Respect is what you get back, and what's left at the end is the big word that we all want in our life. It's trust.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When I respect you because you're always accountable for your actions. Because you're always accountable for your actions, I now trust you.
Yeah. And how do how are you accountable? How do you become an accountable person? Is you have integrity with your word and your actions. Your words and deeds line up. And when they don't, you get those things clear. You get back in integrity, as it were. That is just as much being accountable as is exactly executing what you originally said. You know what I mean? Because like you said, perfection is it's never going to be reality. And I'm glad you brought that up as well, because historically, in my experience as a person, as a quote unquote recovering perfectionist, as I have shared a few times.
Can I join that group?
Yeah, I know. I like to talk about this because if there are people listening to our show that resonate with or identify with this feeling of, oh, I probably am a perfectionist on some level, or holy shit, I'm definitely a perfectionist, at whatever range you might or might not identify with that, watch how that might be keeping you from doing a team, from being on a team, because perfectionism will be uncovered and confronted in a team environment. It just will. And so that's a really amazing hells to the yeah growth experience. I cannot encourage it enough. Super invite, all of the things I always say. But I also can recognize that in my past choices, I would fear not being able to be perfect. And this is an unconscious thing that I've only really worked out with my elevated consciousness and deeper healing work that I've done over the last, whatever number of years. It's very clear that kept me from saying yes to working with other people longer than I ever would want it to block someone else.
This is part of the notes that I had made earlier about some of the challenges that come from working in a team environment is having to accept that everybody that you work with doesn't have the same set of ideals as you, or the same approach to things and the same route to getting to whatever it is, or the same end vision. Like, even if we have agreed upon the goal, my interpretation of that might be different from somebody else's. And what we're forced to develop as a skill when working in teams is patience. The process is going to be simultaneously faster and slower, right?
So true.
Right? So in some ways, the group learning environment, it cannot be substituted. So it's simple enough. If I spend my time working in a group of half a dozen people, every time we do something, there's 6, it's happening at an exponent of 6, then it would take me 6 times as long to get through the whole process. So there's just not enough years in my life to do the same amount in such a short period of time. So the timeline to get through all the possible mistakes, iterations, completing all the possible tasks, whatever it might be, gets greatly reduced. And I'll use the example of my classroom, which very often is the case. I'll have half a dozen or a dozen people in a classroom, and say 12 people all go up and make the same jump individually. They all try to land a parachute one after another, and everybody makes a little version of a mistake in some direction. Now, you made one, but there's 11 other people in the room. We've got 11 versions of mistakes, of little details that you can observe relative to your one that you've made. Now we have 12 times as much learning going on. So we've greatly reduced the timeline to be exposed to all the potential ways that things could possibly go. So that group learning, that team trying to reach a similar goal, a mission, a value-aligned objective, can greatly reduce our individual timeline. But now I have to be willing to be quiet and be patient while 11 other people go through their learning process.
Yes.
And that in itself, I'm going to Mr. Perfectionism is sitting in front of you. Okay. I don't have time to listen to you make your mistakes. I need to get busy accomplishing my goals.
Oh my God. So impatient. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
It's terrible, and so
True.
I'm so grateful for how much I've learned about being patient because of the team environment. And the true value is, it really is tenfold, that if I can now absorb everybody else's experience into my own, and I don't even have to do anything except for sit here and listen the whole time. And at the same time, I get to become a better listener in the process.
God.
Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, going back to the entrepreneurial version of a team, that so came up for me as I grew as a person, is the unwillingness or the feeling of I don't trust anybody to do it as well as me. Like that comes up for a lot of people. Oh, it's like, Jesus, girl, check yourself. you know, you know what I mean?
I'm
Like,
sure
check
there are other
yourself.
people who can do it as good or better than you.
Exactly
You
right.
think so?
Exactly
There's 7
right.
billion people on the planet. You're not the best at it.
Exactly right. And it's so funny how that shows up. And I feel like that's also part of like a defense mechanism of not getting into well, not getting into something, but of wanting to control. So like when we work with other people, we can't, I mean, shit, theoretically, I mean, not even theoretically, just quite literally, we cannot control other people. So if you have a control tendency, and again, I'm sharing from my experiences of growth and oh, being confronted with things inside of my own, my own approach that don't work, that I have experienced as not working, is this idea of wanting to control everything in a team environment, and that has kept me from hiring teammates. I've said this, it's like I want that trust before I hire a teammate, right? So there's another side of that conversation, of course, in terms of trusted referral and this and that, but it's not like that's a guaranteed avenue for trust anyway. You know what I mean? So it's really comes from that experience, right? That experience of working together, and then it either works or it doesn't. You learn something and you move forward, whether it's together or apart. So I just want to highlight that because that's been a significant challenge for me in teams, is choosing teammates. That's why when I talk about us as a teammate and I acknowledge you and I am appreciative of your commitment and integrity and accountability and conversation around values alignment and all of the ways that you show up for our team, I'm very grateful for that because it helps me heal that part of me that's like, I can't trust people. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I kind of don't like you right now.
Perfect.
Because you hit on the control button and I was like, no, that's mine. Don't touch that.
So hard.
Don't touch my control button.
It sucks.
It is. I actually put stripes on it because it's like the big hazard button of like, do not touch this button kind of thing. Because I can't tell you how many times I see it in myself. I see it in my teammates. I see it in my partners. And that idea of always wanting to control everything. And then because of that feeling of like, oh, if I just do it all myself, I'm going to ensure that it meets my standard of quality and I don't have to deal with somebody else having a different idea about the way it should go, or having to have a tough conversation, or ending up with a product that's not quite what I had envisioned, and all the things that come along with doing it as a team. But reality is, and I'm just going to be frank with myself and with anybody listening right now, or everybody listening, it includes me. I'm talking to myself right now. Okay. If I don't give up control and allow my team members to influence the direction and the final outcome of the project, chances are a few things. One, it will never get done Number two, it won't be as good as it could have been, right? If I let my teammates influence the outcome, it's probably gonna be better than it would have been if I did it myself, even though I think that my controlling everything is going to ensure the best possible outcome. That's a fallacy. That is completely wrong.
Totally.
Right? The greatest value gained from working as a team is the collective energy that goes into driving what is the final outcome of something, because an individual perspective on something, a sole way of viewing it, isn't going to provide the most well-rounded deliverable at the end of the project, right? Because it's an hourglass. We all look at things from our direction and everybody looks back at it from their direction. And you can never see all the different possible viewpoints and perspectives on how it's going to look. And so when we get in this like tunnel vision of, I got to control everything so it fits my version, what you end up with is something that only fits one version on the other side.
Oh, right? God. It's so not, it's just so wildly not as awesome.
No.
like just straight up. One of the thing that I wrote down, and this is so legit in every team experience, even the hard ones, is that we can do so much more together than we can apart. We just, and the true value, and you touched on this earlier in the episode, is what we actually get from our team experiences and doing the work of showing up with integrity, holding ourselves accountable, respecting the process, respecting each other, respecting ourselves, respecting our word. Doing all of those things then delivers us a trust, as you pointed to, within those relationships that is, trust can be hurt, obviously, through future choices. So I'm not saying that it never goes away or can't ever go away. We have to continue respecting and honoring those relationships and our integrity and respect of each other and all of those things, even when we're not in a team environment. Why I bring this up is that when we do that, and when that continues, whether we diverge or not, that for me has become some of the best relationships of my entire life, like completely and totally. I had my housewarming party this weekend, and my old friend Lou Shoney, who was one of my first teammates, and we were on many skydiving teams together, and he's one of my very best friends. And we were reflecting on friendship, and I consider friendship another version of team. Shannon Hernandez, double thumbs up. She was also came up to visit, and she and I definitely, the way that we engage our friendship is very much driven by a core set of shared values: communication, respect, and integrity, acknowledging when we fuck it up, building from there, clearing it out, like all of those things show up in our friendship. And as a result, we have earned a human connection and trust that is wildly moving and valuable to me. So it was just very cool to have them in my space this weekend and just get to be like, that came from teams, and that came from our willingness to follow through and respect and love one another.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear that. I'm so glad to see you supported by so many powerful teammates that really helps to make up who you are. And I can mirror that in myself, that when I think about the people that are close to me in my life, who do I reach out? Like, who's my 5 to 7 people around me that are my really most important people? That's my primary team, right? Like, that's I follow the personal board of directors concept of like, who do I have on my BOD to say, hey man, what do you think about this decision I'm making for myself? Or I have had this idea, I think I'm going this way. And, I call up one of my teammates, one of my best friends, and they say, yeah, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And when I get positive reinforcement from people to say, yeah, man, that's a good idea, I really like hearing that from you. Or, hey man, maybe you should think about this, these like the directional shifts. And I can't say how much I value that team of friends that I have and family members. And it's just so important.
Oh, so true. Is there anything else on your list that we haven't covered we near the end? I had
one word that I had highlighted that you were touching on it with the concept of perfectionism inhibiting teamwork, and it was delegation, and it was the letting go. The big thing, it's letting go, right? It's letting go of the control. So the three pieces had together. It's like this perfectionism idea, which is like the downfall of everything. Like if I can't accept that it's going to be imperfect, then it's never going to be achieved, right? And then if I don't release some control, it's never going to be achieved. And if I don't delegate or allow others to have influence into whatever goal is trying to be accomplished, then it's never going to be achieved. And now we could be talking about making your next Sharpie marker, or we could be talking about developing ourselves spiritually, or we could be talking about building a house. It doesn't make any difference. These points are when we allow others to influence us, and when we are allowed to influence others and working in this exchange of energy environment, is when we truly get connection. And connection, vision aligned, mission aligned, goal aligned, value aligned, when we've got that going on, this is where I think we find that happy, quiet place in ourselves where we get to go, yeah. Yeah, look what we did. Look what we did together. Look what we're doing. Even better is look what we're doing together. When you get to be in the moment of doing it and relishing in the process of doing it. And there's that in the team context is so much. I mean, there's so much to say for that. And I'll take it back to one of my favorite analogies. I love climbing mountains. Anybody who's a listener already knows that. And I love climbing them by myself, right? I like to be walking up that mountain alone, monk on a mission kind of stuff. But it is really, really rewarding to look to your left and have your friends there, and to look to your right and to have your friends there, and to be climbing that mountain together, and to celebrate it on top with hugs and high fives and group photos, and just relishing in presence, right, in that moment of achieving and pushing ourselves. And I'm going to send a little shout out to my friend Cherie right now, because she's doing a little recovery from a little broken damage to herself recently. Nothing too serious, but she'd hurt herself a bit. But we did a mountain climb this summer, and it was a tough one for her. I mean, she was challenged. She was at the upper end of her range of like, oh boy, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah. And it took team. It took team to make that happen. And we've all been on either side of that, of being the one that's like, oh boy, I don't know if I can do this on my own. I need a team, or come on now, you're part of the team. We can do this together.
I love that. And sharing how both roles are so valuable. Being the one helping others and being a supportive teammate, and allowing others to help and support us. Like, there is much courage and just life in both roles. And OMG, should we do team episode number 3?
We weren't wrong, right? There's totally easy to do episode number 2.
God, it's crazy how much there is to talk about. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
Thank you.
God, thank you always.
Thank you for this team. It's really one of my highest values. Yeah.
I'm making heart hands for those of you listening.
Yeah.
Legit, guys. And I actually consider us all a team as well.
I do too. Like the entire audience.
Yeah. Like we share this every week, thank you everyone for listening and being a part of the Trust the Journey family. That's not just us saying a tagline. That's like legitimately, our manifestation of creating a team with you all. So thank you truly for being here and with us.
I'm going to echo that from the heart, straight on, that it would feel really weird to sit in the closet and be like, hey, thanks team for listening. The reality is that thank you is going out to anybody who's on the other end of the line right now. It's that, like, it's the radiant energy heading out through the airwaves around the planet And I know that there are family members on the other side of the earth that are listening to this, that are receiving that thank you, and that they're smiling because they know that it's true and that it's honest and that it's real connection. And that the only reason that we do this is because of that.
Absolutely. If anyone ever has any doubt, you are not alone. We are in this together. Yeah. Fuck yeah. And
go team.
Go team. That's so funny. I know Jay's joking because one of the hashtags I always put, and I do it sort of as a joke, but I don't do it as a joke. It is fucking real. Hashtag go team. Like, it's just a massive frame for me in this life, and I'm so thankful. And seriously, and we mentioned the Trust the Journey family, but you can join us there if you want. So reach out, drop us a line if you have any questions about that, and we'll happily, fill you in more on what that is and how it might be a fit for you or not. But like, you're welcome. Just know that you're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, right on. So as we say every week, guys, remember, keep laughing, keep loving, and keep trusting the journey.